Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my November wrap-up. So the first book I read in November was for a video where I let a random number generator choose the books I read, and the first one was a horror book and was called Hell House. And in this one we were following a group of 4 people who were going to investigate a haunted house, like a famous haunted house. And there had been previously two other investigations to other teams that had gone to that house, but in both of those investigations everyone had died except for one person, and that one person that had survived is now in this new team that is going to go to the house. And so in that team we have that guy who is a medium, but he has somehow learned to kind of shield himself in a way from the spirits. And then we have another medium who has not shielded herself from the spirits. And then we have a guy who doesn't really believe in ghosts. Like, he believes in residual energy, I think that's what he calls it, and that is what he believes is causing the hauntings, but not the concept of ghosts themselves. And then we also have that guy's wife, who she was not exactly invited to be on the team, but she was like, I want to go with you. And so they were like, okay, sure. And so those are the 4 people that are going into the house that is nicknamed Hell House. And so we obviously see them investigating the house and trying to learn what exactly is haunting it. And we also learn about the past of the house and the first owner and everything that he did there, and the weird parties he threw in the house. And the hauntings were actually pretty interesting because not only were the characters attacked by whatever was haunting the house, they were also influenced by whatever was haunting the house. And so that part was very fun, and I was pretty invested in actually learning what the haunting was. And so I was having a lot of fun. But then it was a lot of buildup that led to a pretty anticlimactic ending. And so I didn't really like the ending, which definitely lessened my enjoyment of the book as a whole quite a lot. And also I was never really invested in the characters. The hauntings were fun because they were being attacked, but I was never actually worried whether they survived or not, whether they were okay or not. I never really cared, and so the stakes were not that high. It was just a fun, scary book. But yeah, I didn't really like the ending, but it was still a pretty enjoyable book overall, and I give it 3.5 stars. Then I read Never a Hero, which is the second book in the Monsters series trilogy, I think. And this is a fantasy trilogy, and we follow Joan. And I'm going to give you an overall of the first book because I'm obviously not going to spoil to tell you what happened in the second book. And so we follow Joan, and she is spending summer at her grandmother's house. And she has her dream summer job, and she's working with a boy she has a crush on. So her summer is going great until she realizes that her family, that grandma's side of the family, and obviously her as well, are monsters. And also the powers that they do have as monsters is really, really cool, and definitely something I hadn't seen before, and it's really, really cool. And so she learns as well that the boy she had a crush on is actually a monster hunter, and not just any monster hunter. He's a special monster hunter. There are prophecies and stories about him and everything. And so she has to try to protect her family from that hunter. And the end of the first book was actually insane. And so in the second book we are obviously dealing with the aftermath of what Joan did in the end of the first book. And it definitely went in a direction that I wasn't expecting, but I loved. And the first maybe 30-ish% of the book was kind of slow, and I didn't really know what we were doing, what the plot was gonna be, other than Joan adjusting to the changes that had been created. But other than that, I wasn't really sure what was happening. But then it got really good. We had a clear direction of where we were going, and I was into it. And it definitely got very intense, and I was stressed. And I also really like the main character and how she always tries to do the right thing, even though sometimes it's literally impossible. And there was also a huge reveal that I loved as well. and the ending was once again insane, and I really, really enjoyed it. I actually liked it more than the first book. I gave the first book 4 stars, I think, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. Then I read 2 other books for that video of the random number generator, and the first of those 2 was Final Girls, and this was a science fiction horror, and we were learning about a new sort of therapy that a doctor had created, and it could be used to help people overcome like emotional trauma, but also to somewhat change people's personalities. And it was like a virtual reality thing, like they put you in a virtual reality scenario, a scary scenario, and that is how you overcame whatever you had to overcome. And for example, in the beginning of the book, we see 2 sisters who had never gotten along, but they needed to kind of create a sisterly bond, a sisterly relationship. And so they were in that VR thing, and they were, like I said, in a horror scenario. I think it was with zombies, I'm pretty sure. And so they had to like survive together, and that was how they were creating their bond. And then we see a journalist who is like very skeptic about that therapy. She doesn't really believe that it works. So she decides to enter the VR scenario, and the doctor enters with her to like run her through what is happening. And so while they are in there, they have to obviously like try to survive what is happening in that fake scenario, but also trying to survive dangers in the real world because there are people coming for them. And obviously they don't really like each other that much, but they have to rely on each other because they're the only people that each other has to help them. And I liked it. It was definitely a very fun concept, and it had really fun like fight scenes and action scenes, and I really, really enjoyed that. But I didn't love it. I think it maybe was because it was so short. This was a novella, and I think I would have liked to have seen it like more developed because it was such a cool concept, but I feel like we didn't really get enough of it. But I did really like the way that it ended, and overall I still had a really good time with the book, and I gave it 3.5 stars. And then the last book for that video was The Trials of Morrigan Crow, which is the first book in the Nevermore series, which is a middle grade fantasy series. And we're following Morrigan, and she was cursed because she had been born on Eventide. And every child that is born on Eventide is cursed. And they are basically cursed to die on the next Eventide because Eventide pretty much like marks the end of an age and the start of a new one. And since Morrigan was cursed, she was like blamed for everything that went wrong in their town. They like everyone always blamed Morrigan for literally anything. And one of the books starts like the new Eventide is coming. So basically like the date of Morrigan's supposed death. And also like her family really, really sucks, especially her dad. Absolute trash. But before she is killed by the Eventide, a guy saves her, and he saves her by taking her to a magical town that is called Nevermore. And he wants her to enter some trials to be part of the Wondrous Society. So we see her go through those trials, and I was definitely like, worried is not really the word, but I wasn't sure I was gonna like this book because it is middle grade, and middle grade is definitely not something that I tend to read. Like I hadn't read a middle grade book since I was that age. And so I was not sure if I was gonna like it, and I mean, I liked it, but I didn't love it. Although I definitely liked the second half of the book more than the first, both because the trials in the second half of the book were more interesting than the trial that we got in the first part, but also because you learned more about the villain. And at first, like, we didn't really know if, like, they just talked about someone and the people didn't even know, like, some people didn't even know if he was, like, a real person or just a myth. And in the second half, we definitely learned more about that person, that villain. And there was also a reveal that, I mean, I saw coming, but like it was what I wanted to happen. So I enjoyed the reveal, and so I enjoyed the ending. And I mean, I enjoyed the book overall. I can definitely see why so many people love this book, but it was just not like my type of book because I just don't really tend to read middle grade. But again, overall, it was a fun book. It was enjoyable, and I also gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read two books that were part of the same series, and they were A Gathering of Shadows and A Conjuring of Light, which are books 2 and 3 in the Shades of Magic trilogy, which is a fantasy trilogy. And I had read the first book in October and really enjoyed it. So I was excited to get into these. And basically, in this book, there are like 4 different worlds and 4 different Londons. And so we have Red London, which has magic and is like healthy. And then we have White London, which does have some magic, but not a lot of it. And people try to weaponize every little bit of magic that they can find. Then we have Grey London, which does not have magic and is kind of decaying. And I mean, White London is also kind of decaying. And then finally, Black London, which, like, I mean, exists, like the world exists, but it is destroyed, like completely destroyed. It was completely destroyed by the magic that it had, and so it's like closed off from the other worlds. And we start by following Kel, who is an Antari, which means that he can travel through the worlds. And when he goes to, and he's from Red London, and when he travels to one of the other Londons, he is given like an object to transport to another London. And he quickly learns that it is like a magical stone that is definitely very dangerous. And there are dangerous people after that stone. And while he is like in danger running from the people that want the stone, he meets Lila, who is from Grey London. And she wants to be a pirate. And she is an absolute icon. And so they work together to try to figure out what to do with the stone and that whole magical situation. And so in the second book, I definitely didn't love it as much as I expected. And I think it was because it was much more focused on the characters than on the plot. And although I did like the characters, I don't think I loved them enough to love a book that was just about like character development. I did love the end of book 2, which set up like what was going to happen in book 3. So again, like it was still a very enjoyable book. I just didn't love it. And I also gave this one 3.5 stars. And then the third book, A Conjuring of Light, I definitely enjoyed more than book 2 because like there was like a lot of plot. We were seeing everything happening and there was like the final battle, which was fun, but I didn't like absolutely love it. Like it was not as epic as I was expecting, but I still really enjoyed it. And overall, like I'm happy with how it ended, like where the characters ended up. And I feel like it was definitely a good conclusion for the trilogy, but it still left like some open plots for the next trilogy that like has recently come out, like the first book has come out. And so yeah, I definitely enjoyed this one more. I still didn't like absolutely love it, but I enjoyed it a lot and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read 2 books in another series, and they were Nemesis Games and The Vital Abyss, which are books 5 and 5.5 in the Expanse series. And this is a science fiction series, and it is obviously set in the future, and it is set in a world where there are humans living in a lot of the planets in the solar system. And the end of the 4th book, there was definitely like something revealed that was like not a good sign for the future. It was definitely very concerning for the future of this world. And obviously I can't get into the plot of this book because it is the 5th in the series, but there is basically an attack at the beginning of the book by like an extremist group that wanted to change the power dynamics in the universe. Basically, putting it very simply, that is pretty much what happened, and people were trying to fix that basically. And we always follow Holden and his crew. They are like the main characters of the series, but there is like always like Holden's POV and then other people's POV, like other people that we get to meet. But in this book, it was different. We had the POV of every single member of Holden's crew because they were all doing like separate things. They were all like in different places, which was very sad for me because I love seeing them together. I love their little family. They are really, really adorable. So that was sad. But on the other hand, I loved getting to know all of them better because we spent pretty much a 4th of the book with each one. And I really, really loved getting to know them better because I absolutely love these characters. And we also got to see 2 characters that have appeared in previous books, and I love those 2 characters so much, and I hope that they continue to be present in the series because they're fucking amazing. But yeah, I love getting to know the characters better, and I also love the plot. Like I was invested from start to finish, and I was definitely on the edge of my seat. I was stressed, And there was something that happened at the end of this book that definitely has me even more stressed, like more worried for the future of this world. But I loved every single second of reading this book, and I gave it 5 stars. And then the Vital Abyss, we were following a group of scientists that were prisoners. And we were specifically following like one of those scientists, and we were getting like chapters in the present when he was a prisoner, but also chapters in the past, and we got to know his past a little better and how ruthless he was, and how for him and like his team the ends justify any means. And honestly, it was kind of scary. And he was like connected to a lot of things that happened in previous books, and it also like helped explain some of previous events a little better, so I really enjoyed that. And also he was present in the prologue of this book, and it also explained that better, so I really enjoyed it. And like at first I was very confused with what was happening, but once I figured out what was happening, I really liked it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Cradle of Ice, which was the second book in the Moonfall series, which is a fantasy series. And we start, again, I'm going to talk about the first book. We start following a young girl who foretells the end of the world, and basically she's given a death sentence because of that. And we also follow 3 men. So we have a prince, a soldier, and a thief. And the thief finds sort of an artifact, which I mean is an artifact, but it's not like a normal artifact. It's definitely very special. It definitely has magic. And those 4 characters, like, they come together to obviously try to prevent the end of the world, try to save their world. And in this second book, they are still obviously trying to do that. And we learn a lot more, like in the second book, we learn a lot more about like the magic and some prophecies. And there are definitely some intense action scenes, some intense fight scenes, and especially towards the end of the book, like I was stressed because every single character was in danger. Like every single character was almost dying, and I was very stressed. But I really enjoyed it. Obviously, again, I can't really say much about the plot, but it was a very fun book. Like I had been putting it off since February, which was when it came out. Like it was one of my anticipated releases for the year, but because it was so long, I was worried it was gonna like be kind of boring, like it was gonna feel very long. But I mean, it was not the most like fast-paced book I've ever read, obviously, because it was 700 pages. But it was like it didn't feel like slow. It was like a good pacing. I had fun. I was never bored, and I had a lot of fun with it. And the ending of this book, absolutely insane. Like I need the continuation for the series, like now. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a great time with it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And then the 10th and final book that I read was System Collapse, which was the 7th book in the Murderbot Diaries series, which is a science fiction series. And it is obviously, again, set in the future. And in this world, like every exploratory team is assigned an android for security. And we are following one of those androids who calls itself Murderbots. And, you know, along the series, we learn why it calls itself Murderbots, and we follow it through like several missions with its humans, and its relationship with the humans definitely evolves, because at first it doesn't really like humans because it has had some previous bad experiences, but it learns to, you know, love humans. And now like it's always worried about the humans, and like Murderbot is so adorable. It is definitely the best thing about this series is like Murderbot's personality. And this book picks up like right after the end of book 6 and right after the mission that they had in book 6. And this one is like a mix of the aftermath of that, but also deals with some unexpected people that they had to deal with. And also Murderbot is kind of malfunctioning, which obviously not great, but I mean, the mission was really fun. I was stressed, I was invested in the plot, but once again, the best thing about the series is just Murderbot and its personality, and I just love it so much. And I had a lot of fun with it, and I gave this one 4.5 stars as well. And yeah, those are all the books I read in November. It was definitely a very successful reading month because, I mean, first of all, 10 books for me is successful, definitely, but also because I really liked all of the books I read. Like the lowest rating I gave was 3.5 to some books, and I had a 5-star book, and I had a few 4.5s. So it was definitely a very good reading month. I had a lot of fun with all of the books I read. So yeah, definitely very happy with this reading month. And that is everything for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!